Good day to everyone watching and listening with us right now. Welcome to our first ever video podcast entitled What the Health? This month's series is bringing drug abuse and addiction into the light. My name is 𝗗𝗿𝗏
And I'm Brandon, and we are your hosts for today's episode. But before we start our program, we want to acknowledge our partners who made this event possible.
This podcast was made in partnership with the UP Pre-Medical Honor Society, UP Sigma Rho Fraternity, UP Manila DOST Scholars Union, UP Kabataan 𝗍𝗲𝗄𝗏 𝗍𝗏𝗄𝗏, UP Manila 𝗍𝗏𝗀𝗏, UP Manila College of Public Health Student Council, UP Pharmaceutical Association Student Council, UP Dentistry Student Council, UP Euro-Filipino Understanding and Relations Organization, Youth for Christ, UP Manila, Bulso Kababayang Yayakap sa mga Kapuspalad, Progressive and Responsive Organization of Pharmacy, UP Kalinaw, and MVTTV Philippines.
Done in cooperation with UP Lacan Manila, De La Salle Red Cross Youth Senior High School, UP Manila Indayog Dance Varsity, UP 𝗍𝗍𝗀𝗆, with special mention to Alyansang Tapat sa Lasalista, UP Law Student Government, and the Council of Organizations of the Ateneo Manila Health and Environment Cluster. Once again, thank you so much to all our partners. With that said, we can start the first episode of What the Health? But what is it exactly? Would you mind telling our audience what it's about, CJ?
Sure, Bran. What the Health is an initiative of the UPM USC Health Committee that aims to highlight different public health issues each month, raising public awareness and reducing stigma through information and education. With the declaration of every third week of November as Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Week, our theme for the first series is bringing drug abuse and addiction into the light.
That's right, and we are excited to present to you our first episode, Ending the Stigma, Drug Abuse and Addiction, which will discuss drug abuse and addiction from different perspectives, tackle why people become dependent on drugs. And this can include biological, behavioral, cultural, and environmental factors.
Now, this theme is highly relevant because drug abuse and addiction can be detrimental to any person's life. Drug abuse and addiction can change how a person acts and thinks, and in the long term, it can create permanent changes.
So, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our speakers for today. How about you, CJ?
Well, of course, I'm very excited too, Brad. I'm really looking forward to hearing their insights this afternoon. Their expertise will definitely create a meaningful discussion. And with that being said, let's introduce our speakers.
Exactly. And for this week, we have introducing our first speaker, we have here with us the Board of Directors and Director for External Affairs for Safe Open Space Philippines, CJ.
So he is a distinguished leader and trainer. He is also the co-founder of a community-based organization working towards promoting human rights and harm reduction in the Philippines, Safe Open Space.
Let's all welcome Mr. Orlando S. Agawin. Good day po.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here, and thank you for coming up with something like this. You know, for our young people, for our students in the university, especially those who are going to be part of the medical profession. And this is something that's quite phenomenal, and I'm really very excited to be here.
And we're all very excited to have you here with us. Honestly, I've been waiting for this day because I am so excited to talk about our topic today.
I can feel it, Brad.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so to introduce our next speaker, CJ.
So our next speaker is a community access to redress and empowerment care officer for NCR of TLF Share, a nonprofit community-based organization that supports and serves PLHIVs and other key populations as well as help them get redressed if they experience discrimination and human rights violations. Now let's give it up for Mr. 𝗷𝗿𝗆𝗆.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm also with SOS Philippines as a board director and the director for external relations. And thank you for extending this invitation to us to talk about the topic that you have chosen. And just like Orly, we appreciate so much your coming up with this topic, because this is something that the public should have increased awareness of when it comes to drug abuse, as well as drug addiction. Thank you.
Okay. And we thank you for accepting our invitation to be here with us today, despite our very busy schedules. Okay. So for our next speaker, he is a harm reduction advocate whose organization, 𝐼DU-CARE, is a peer-based community for people affected by drugs and provides access to HIV, Hep C counseling, screening, and treatment. Once again, let's all welcome the founder and executive director of 𝐼DU-CARE, Mr. Johan Nadella.
Yes, like they said, thank you very much for inviting me. Hopefully I can can tell what our experience, and hopefully I can give a takeaway of our of this topic, a wonderful takeaway of insights. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're surely looking forward for that. And now for our last speaker, would you like to do the honors, Fran?
Yes, I would. And to complete our set of speakers, he is the Commission of Population and Development and NEDA. He is the EO and founder of Alaga Health and expert of Play Labs Incorporated. He was also a resource speaker in the Drug Abuse Prevention Education in 2018 about health impacts of illegal drugs on youth. So let's all welcome Commissioner Dexter Galban.
Hi, hello, and good day to everyone who's listening. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a homecoming for me, going back to my alma mater, UP Manila. And sa lahat ng mga nakikinig o nanonood, magandang araw po sa inyong lahat.
Okay, yes. Thank you. I didn't know that you're na UP grad ka pala, Dr. Galban. That's very interesting. Okay, thank you so much. Hopefully this homecoming will be very, hope you very sentimental for you, especially. Yeah, really excited to hear from everyone here. Okay.
Again, I'd like to welcome everyone to our podcast. We'd like to say that we're all grateful that all of you made the time to be here with us today. And I feel like, drug abuse and addiction is something we frequently hear on the news, on the television, but we don't really discuss about it in depth.
Yeah, and usually you just hear what people say on the media, on the news, or especially like just already access it from our phone, or what people just usually hear when we say the word drugs, right? But before I can suppose we can really talk in depth about what drug abuse is, I think it's good to have uh, some groundwork first, right? So we have to define what drugs and how are drugs used. Paano nga ba sila ginagamit? No? Ano nga ibig sabihin ng drugs? Maybe any one of our speakers would like to. Okay. I guess we could ask Dr. Dexter Galban.
Sure. When you say illegal drug use or drug abuse for that matter, it would mean the use of substances that are harmful to the body in general and have been flagged by the community, by society, by government as dangerous substances, no? And can have long-term and debilitating effects sa body. And that's very important to distinguish that from other medications that when used properly can be very beneficial, may therapeutic aspect siya. But at the same time, this can also include drug abuse in a sense that even the prescription medications, when taken not in the proper way, can also serve as detrimental substances to the body. So very important to know those nuances at the same time.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's very important.
Susugan ko lang yun, Brandon, no, yung sinabi ni Doc Dexter about our definition of what do we really mean when we say drug abuse. From SOS, our standpoint there is that the term drug abuse, that being a descriptive phrase, have eventually been fossilized na into a whole new meaning. Na sabi natin drug abuse, ito na ay droga. No, in the Filipino term, the slang droga, na it's shabu, it's methamphetamine, it's ecstasy. But then again, the scientific definition of drug abuse is the inappropriate use of even our prescribed drugs. Like say, for example, binigyan ako ni Doc Dexter ng, early inumin mo itong 𝗖𝗯𝗂𝗆 ng 3 beses isang araw. Dahil matutulog naman ako buong araw, ininom ko na yung 3 lang sabay-sabay. No? So that in itself is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doc Dex, but that could be categorized or a manifestation of abusing a prescribed drug, however legal, no, however over the counter. When Jem and I are calibrating on your questions, and when we were having conversations with members of the Safe Open Space Philippines members and officers, napag-usapan namin yung mga nanay natin nung araw, yung kapag may sipon tayo, yung Vicks VapoRub, ipapahid sa dibdib, sa likod, tapos ilalagay sa loob ng ilong mo. Ginawa ba yung mga nanay? Ginawa yun sa amin, no?
Yes, ginawa po yun sa amin.
Oo, di ba? Parang, kung titingnan natin, ngayong malalaki na tayo, titingnan natin yung likod ng Vicks VapoRub. Sabi sa Vicks VapoRub na label, for external use only. So, hindi siya pwede pala sa iloob ng ilong, no? And that in itself, in its strict sense, is that how we define drug abuse. So magandang doon tayo magsimula no? O kaya maaaring bumalik tayo doon sa definition na yon, no? Sa kontekstong iyon, na it's time for us to really call out and say, when we say drug abuse, ito yung inappropriate use of drugs, no? Consequently though, dumating yung mga panahon na methamphetamine, is something na hindi naman pinrescribe sa akin, pero ginagamit ko. You get what I mean? At ginagamit ko siya nang naaayon sa dami ng gusto kong gamitin ngayong araw na ito. So, kaya siya nakapasok doon sa definition na yon. Consequently though, ngayon when we say drug abuse, wala na yung konsepto ng Vicks or nag-overdose ka ng biogesic. When you say drug abuse now, it's about using illegal drugs, no? And sometimes we equate the meaning of drug abuse to drug addiction. No, na parang kapag nag-abuse na ako ng drugs, if I'm abusing drugs, I'm a drug addict. No? So, yun yung maganda kasi yung usapin na yon, because ito yung nagsisimula ng stigma and eventually could, trigger and encourage discrimination as you move forward.
Yeah. That's true.
Mm. Okay. Wow. Okay. That's right. Actually, I only learned now that mali pala yung paggamit ng Vicks Vapor Rub sa internally. And I didn't know. I'm actually quite curious. Like, this is slight sidetrack. How did that actually come to happen? Yung pag ganun? If it's like really like that's a drug abuse, no? Yung paggamit, yung pagpasok sa ilong. How did that happen? Like,
Well, I'm not a medical expert. Probably Doc Dexter could, explain that further. But, kasi meron tayong substance eh. 'Di ba? May access tayo dun sa drug. Sabihin natin it's Vicks, it's biogesic, it's methamphetamine. We have access to it eh. Tapos and most of the time people would find ways on how they could play around in terms of how could I administer this to my body. You get what I mean? Na parang, kanino ba nakuha ng nanay ko yung paglalagay ng Vicks Vapor Rub sa ilong? Hindi ko alam, no? Sa ang libro niya nabasa yon, maaaring nakita niya sa iba, di ba? O maaaring ginawa rin niya as a self-medication process, na parang ginawa niya sa sarili niya, nawala yung pagbabara ng ilong, no? There was probably a point when na-achieve niya yung objective niya. Nasusundan niyo ba yung sinasabi ko?
Gets.
So you see, this is also similar to the use of illegal drugs. Na parang, nasa akin, I have access to the drug at nag-iisip ako ng paraan kung paano ko ito ipapasok because I have an objective, no? May motivation. I want to achieve something. And that's also very important when we talk about these areas of these things about drug use. Na parang it's not just about using drugs. It's also important that we think about what is it that the individual want to achieve. No, na parang gusto ba niyang gumaling, gusto ba niyang lumigaya, gusto ba niyang manahimik, gusto ba niyang makatulog. There are, and that's the reason why we take drugs, no? In generally, meron tayong gustong makamit, no? May motivation, may objective, no?
So having that motivation and objective, so is drug addiction the same as behavioral addiction?
Perhaps I can take a stab at that, no? So when you talk about drug addiction, it is a condition that's related to substances. No, you use substances. In this particular instance, drugs, as mentioned by Sir Orly, malaki yung coverage niya, no? Not just the popular notion of using illegal drugs, but even the prescription drugs, as I mentioned a while ago. And one of the reasons why somehow the narrative shifted was because of how dangerous the impact of these drugs are or have been to people and have actually converted to more severe medical conditions that are lifetime ang management. And when we talk about behavioral addiction, there are a lot of components there, no? That is not necessarily related to substances, not necessarily related to drugs, not necessarily related to other instances wherein there would be an intake of an item or probably a medication or a liquid or whatnot. Pero they fall within the same realm wherein there is this notion of dependence on something. Kinakailangan mo yung isang bagay paulit-ulit, and to the extent that you find it either as a means to feel happy, to feel contented, to feel protected, or to somehow block thoughts or ideas that you feel are harmful to you. And dito nagkakaroon ng interplay dyan because now napakalaki ng link between what we see right now as quote-unquote drug addiction with the manifestations that are now happening when it comes to the behavioral aspect. Naglabasan na yung ibang mga mental health related concerns and conditions because of drug abuse that's happening all over.
Oh, okay. Well, would anyone else want to add to what Dr. Galban said? Oh. Okay. Well, that was a very wonderful explanation. Actually, I don't have any other follow-up questions to what you said. That was very well said. So there is this notion of drug addiction and behavioral addiction. Now I just want to ask like another question. Maybe Mr. Jem, you could answer this. Is how come? What are the common misconceptions or the perspectives on drug abuse and addiction? Because as we've talked about a while ago, no, we already equate yung drugs or drug abuse or drugs to droga agad, yung mga methamphetamine and so on. Maybe you can expound on that.
Yeah. The common misconceptions or the misimpressions about drug abuse and drug addiction is that it's considered as a criminal problem when it should not be considered as a criminal problem. It should be looked at the lens from various lenses. It should not be looked into from one lens alone or from one pair of lens alone. We should look at it as to why people would use drugs. And just in connection with what Orly had said, there are various reasons as to why people would use drugs. And we call that, in our community, we call that as ranges of realities.
Ranges of
So
realities.
yes, ranges of realities. So that's one common misconception when we talk about drug abuse and also or the misuse of drugs, that it influences persons to commit crimes, when in fact that's not the case that's not the case all of the time. As I mentioned, there are many reasons why people would use drugs. Perhaps the Orly can also add to what I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. A common misconception is that if you're a drug user, you're a criminal, no? Ikaw ay masama, no? May question now when it comes to the lens of morality, no? Especially in the Filipino setting na ay addict yan, no? Naku, may addict sa bahay niyo, itago niyo yung radyo niyo, mawawala yan mamaya. If you get my drift, no? So may paranoia na, may takot, may distance, no? Kapag kahit nga reformed addict, no, yung dating addict yan, nag-a-addict yan, no? So you see, it's already integrated in the Filipino language, na yung addict ay naging verb na, no? Na naging pandiwa na siya. Nag-addict yan, nag-a-addict, mag-a-addict yan balang araw, no? So that in itself would come with a certain definition, thus a stigma, no? But if you really think about it, another would be kapag drug user, siya ay kriminal, no? Siya ay kriminal, siya ay nakakasira ng lipunan, siya ay pabigat sa pamilya. But are we really sure? Meron ba tayong data na nagsasabi noon, no? Us in the academe and probably and also you in the medical profession should be driven by evidence, no? Pagdating sa inyong mga approaches, pati ng the way that you would treat your patients and your clients. At mahalaga sa atin ang data. Now, if we go back to the data of the 5, let's say for example, of 5 people who are using drugs, ilan ba talaga doon ang kriminal, no? At meron pa tayong tinatawag na kapag addict, sira na ang ulo niyan or luto na yung utak, no? Wala nang utak, parang pinrito na yung utak. Na parang, are we really sure na nakakaprito siya ng utak? Na lahat na nag-methamphetamine or gumamit ng mga illegal drugs ay sira na ang ulo, no? Are we really sure? Do we have data on that, no? Meron pa tayong tinatawag na half-life, no? Na parang kasi hindi naman lahat ng gumagamit ay nawawala ng buhay. When we say half-life, ito yung tipong yung half niya, he's high, he or she is high, tapos yung the other half is the functional life. You get what I mean? Parang may half-life pa rin ang isang user. No? And this is something that we can look into, na meron siyang buhay, meron siyang dignidad, meron siyang at meron siyang dahilan kung bakit niya ito ginagawa, no? Probably later on we'll be talking about how do we address and support these people. But for now, I'd like just to put it there, no, na meron silang intention, meron silang gustong ma-achieve, no? At meron silang dahilan kung bakit nila ito ginagawa. But other than above it all, they still have dignity, and we have to uphold that. I think Johan was, unmuted himself kanina ba?
Yeah, I just want to, yung misconception. So yung nasabi nila lahat yun. At sa idagdag ko lang yung data that wala naman talaga yung data yung magamit ka yung brainwashing. Kasi na media yan eh. Yung once you use the drugs, yung brain mo ay nag-shrink. So I think walang medical data yon. Correct me if I'm wrong kung nandito ang doctor ngayon. Pero yung isa yung yung mag-first ka magamit, wala addict ka na. Diba? Don't use once, then pag matry mo ng once, hindi ka na yung misconception yun. Yung pag you try yung once, yun lang, maraming misconception eh. Then yung misconception ang hirap that it resulted to, alam mo na, U2 policy ng punity because of that misconception. Yeah, I think yun lang yung ma-share ko.
Sir Jem, you would like to add something as well?
Yeah, let me also add to what Orly had said when it comes to human dignity of a drug user. At the end of the day, no matter what the reasons are why a person would use drugs, at the end of the day, he or she is a human being, is a person who deserves to have the same rights and privileges as a member of society. They should not be deprived of, or their rights should not be violated. For example, due process. That is something that should be upheld when it comes to dealing with persons who use drugs. Unfortunately, in the political climate that we have right now, that right specifically has been violated many times, thousands of times. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Okay.
If I may just share, there was this one moment, there was this one instance when I was confronted with, parang may nakita akong nanay sa isang neighborhood na pinapagalitan yung anak niya sa kalsada. No? Parang, ikaw, nagsasabo ka na daw. Napakawalang hiya mo, sabi ng nanay. Yung Filipino scene na ganyan in public. Napakawalang hiya mo, addict ka na. Tapos sumagot yung anak, sabi ng anak, grabe naman na, isang beses pa lang, addict na agad. Hindi ba pwedeng biktima lang? I actually stepped back and really reflected on that statement, no, na parang nagbibiro ba siya? Or may laman yung sinabi niya, no, na parang kung babalikan natin, meron siyang dahilan, no? Kung if I am to really uphold his humanity, his dignity as a human, at inirespeto ko ang kanyang karapatan, marahil pwede akong lumapit sa kanya, tanongin sa kanya, paano ka naging biktima? Tingnan natin yung mga aspeto na yun na nagbiktima sa'yo. At maaaring kapag na-address natin yun na hindi ka nagagamit. If you get my drift, no? It's just like going back to that moment when going back to the misconception of putting drug use and addiction as something that is criminal.
As Dr. Dexter,
sorry po. Because we were talking, na-mention ni Orly yung motivation. Yung na-observe ko talaga yung mga drug users because I'm working lots of drug users here in Cebu. Yung talagang motivation nila why they use drugs is hindi naman masama eh. Like working or hindi. Party lang, gusto lang sila sa barkada. Yung wala, hindi sila let's do drugs, then mag-crime tayo. Yung motivation nila. wala talagang it's ano ba yun? Wala talagang harm yung motivate na mag-drug sila because they just want to feel, maybe they want to just feel relaxed galing sa work or papuntang work para mag-progressive siya na mag-work. Like example, like magsasyabu ako dahil overtime siya mag-study, di ba? Yung motivation na yun. Or mag-work siya kasi overtime siya mag-drive ng jeep para makakano pera. Ganun yung motivation eh. Wala naman talagang motivation. Hala, mag-rape tayo. Mag-drugs ako para mag-rape ako. Wala naman ganun yung motivation. So, thank you po.
So I guess it's safe to say na we can associate drug addiction with stress din, no? Yun. I think Doc Galban would like to share his input on it.
Yes, thank you for that. No, I love listening to these perspectives because they are valid from those vantage points. Absolutely, I would have to take those into account. Kasi yung issue natin when it comes to drug abuse and drug abuse prevention, kasi meron siyang dalawang muka. We have yung ating punitive approach, wherein of course if they cross the line and they already inflict harm on other people, kunyari ng rape o nanaksak o pumatay, there has to be some level of accountability or protection to that extent. That's one phase. But kailangan natin i-take into account that there's also another phase, the rehabilitative. Particularly, there is this approach wherein we have to ensure that we create an environment that will actually deter them from getting into that cycle, no? And why is that important? Because you always have to go to the reason why they are using, no? Nabanggit ni Sir Johan kanina, for some, they don't really intend to use drugs with the intent of committing crime. But we also have to take into account, no, that there's a possibility for them to conduct themselves in such a way, if uncontrolled, if unregulated, if are unmitigated, for example. But we have to go deeper than that, kasi that is what the general public sees. We have to go deeper because here we now have to tackle the issues on mental health, the same issues that is affecting everyone. For example, why is it that they are looking for these substances that make them feel happier or elated? Kasi lalawak yung discussion natin. This is falling within the same realm as to why people smoke, why people drink alcohol, why people vape or use any other substance that they feel can make them feel better quickly, right? And of all of the substances, one of the most potent ways to go from 0 to 100 in a snap would be these substances, these drugs. And of course, we're talking more about the illegal drugs, no? Kasi you can also be addicted to other substances like drugs that are for pain medications, etc. There's also that aspect, but we're talking about the ones that is more commonly discussed. So we have to now discuss, bakit nga ba natutulak o madaling mahikayat? Sabi nga ni Sir Orly kanina, biktima ako. Why? Why would someone think of themselves as a victim? Because there really are drug pushers. There really are people who are pushing people to become addicted to these substances because they will earn a lot. Now, why do they do this, or how exactly do they target these people? They target individuals who they feel may be more vulnerable or would be more inclined to become dependent sa isang substance na pag ginamit nila, parang lahat ng problema nila 0 to 100 out temporarily. And then hahanapin nila. That's why they would always approach, particularly drug pushers, and this is based on our FGDs, no, would always have the first or second try free. Papatikimin ka. They will make you enticed to the thought of going out of your problems in a snap. So we really have to now evaluate the society in general. Are we in a society that is actually pushing people to take drugs, or is making them more inclined to use illegal substances because of a bigger underlying problem such as mental health, lack of social support, whether in terms of employment, education, or family dynamics, etc.
Right. Fantastic. Yeah.
So, yun, thank you. So, I guess big factor nga rin ang mental health when it comes to drug addiction. So, I'm just wondering, is there other factors besides mental health affecting the addiction, or can we say na mental health talaga yung primary uh factor for it?
Okay. Sagutin ko yun, Karel, no? Kami sa SOS, we're looking at, and this is something that we also learned from NoBox, no? Johan and I were certified under NoBox sa harm reduction approach, no? Dun sa katanungan na ano yung mga factors na pwedeng maka-apekto, no, na pwedeng maka-result to drug abuse or eventually addiction, no? Meron kaming dalawang tinitingnan. Ito yung set and setting, no? Yung set ay yung nasa loob ng individual, no? Yung nasa kanyang internal, kanyang iniisip, siya ba ay gutom, siya ba ay inaantok, siya ba ay pagod, siya ba ay namumroblema, siya ba ay depressed, siya ba ay masaya at gusto pa niyang masumaya. Ano yung kanyang mga motivations? Ilang taon na siya, babae ba siya o lalaki? You know, those are your sets. You know, so this could be your factors. This could be one. These are your first category of factors that you need to consider. The next one would be your setting, and this is the environment. Nasaan? Environment would be your external. So the external as a setting is external to the individual. So nasaan ba siyang environment? Sino yung kanyang support system? Sabi ni Doc Dexter kanina, may kapitbahay daw na drug pusher, tapos kailangan kumayod yung pusher na yon. Kaya lalo nangihikayat, nagbabagsak presyo. Mas accessible yung drugs. You get what I mean? Maaari ding peer pressure, no? In the MSM community, we have what we call the emerging culture of chemsex, and I'll put it there on the table now. DOH right now has started to explore potential research and studies on this because it's posing a risk among the MSM communities in the Philippines. Nandito na yung mga kabilang mga opportunities to engage into like uninhibited sex. You get what I mean? Na parang papasok na ako sa isang porn film, gagawa na ako ng sarili kong indie kapag ginawa ko yan. You get what I mean? Na parang I'll be part of the illusion that I grew up in, you know? So ito yung setting. Another would be your support system. Sino ang support system mo? Sino ang tumutulong sa'yo? Sino ang umiiwas sa'yo? No? Maaring meron kang minamahal na nawala sa'yo. That's external. That would affect eventually your set. No? The internal. So, yan yung tinitingnan namin. Kaya ang tawag namin yun ay drug set setting. No? Drug set setting actually, ay alam ni Doc Dexter yan, ano pa yan, 1960s pa yan. But it eventually took another form and definition for SOS because yan yung tinitingnan namin, no? If you would look at it, tatlong areas yon, yung drug, set, and setting, no? Consequently, our society only looks at the drug. No, na parang kapag ang isang individual ay gumagamit, we only look at the drug. Hindi na natin tinitingnan na kamusta ka? No? Meron ka bang gustong ikwento? What's your story? 'Di ba? Kamusta ang environment? Why? Because if we are to look at the factor, examine, embrace, and probably provide support in the set and the setting, there is a hope na yung drug ay ma-manage. The drug use could be managed. So just to answer the question, what are the factors? From us, from our perspective, ito yung factors, no? Ng dalawang pwede nating matingnan. The set, which is internal to the individual, and then the setting, which is external to the individual.
And thank you. Ang dami kong natutunan on.
Yeah. It's actually, I think Sir Jem would like to add one more to this. Definitely would love to hear more.
With regard chemsex, yes, indeed, what Orly had said, it's an emerging issue among men who have sex with men. When we talk about chemsex, by the way, it's there's another term for that. It's sexualized drug use. They take a substance or a chemical to increase their sexual drive or their sexual energy, and it's something that is also driving the HIV prevalence in the country. So that's something also that DOH is also looking at, perhaps to manage the effects of chemsex with regard when we talk about the HIV situation in the country. And that's why they are going to come up with this research on how to go about how to effectively address this problem. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add more, or is everyone
that was
okay now?
very comprehensive. It's really, that's something quite new, actually. I think for most of us here. That's new now, that connection of the chemsex and how that affects yung mga HIV, increasing HIV people here. That's something I probably would have not been able to make the connections on. So not only like
based on Dr. Gideon's, I don't know, no, but I can access it right now. Yun daw pagsali sa isang, if you are an FSM practicing or joining chemsex, no, according to research, and this is a global research, you have a 22% more chance of getting HIV. So mas mataas yung risk. No, so there's a higher chance of exposure to HIV, which is alarming for us, considering that the Philippines is, number 1 na nga tayo sa Southeast Asia. No?
I think Dr. Gaban wants to add to that.
Actually, I'd like to expand it a little bit, no? Kasi especially to our viewers who are not identifying as MSM or are not familiar with that, actually, it will also affect those who do not identify as part of the LGBTQI+ community. Why? Because dun sa issue natin ng teenage pregnancies or young individuals, youth engaging in high-risk behavior. So for us in PopCom, part ng aming mga ginagawang advokasya, yung mga programa, they actually go beyond the general provision of information about family planning, sexual health and reproductive health. Kasama na dito yung mental health, kasama dito yung drug abuse prevention education. Why? Kasi magkakasama silang lahat eh. In the same way that, for example, individuals or men who have sex with men will be engaging in chemsex, for example, to amplify the emotions or to amplify the level of pleasure, that can also be done in the same sense by those who are probably male, female, or probably more at risk now of getting pregnant. We're seeing here din kasi a spike in teenage pregnancy, and recently we have been pushing for the declaration of a national social emergency on teenage pregnancy. So you see, just one topic, kumawing siya to the issues on HIV, kumawing siya sa issue of teenage pregnancy spikes, and so many other things, and even mental health. So really, it just goes to show that we have to talk about drug abuse prevention and education. So thank you again for this program.
Well, thank you, Dr. Galvan.
Yes, Bran, I think this is we've already consumed the 20 minutes for this session. So ayun, I would like to say, I would like to wrap it up first. Thank you for clearly defining drug abuse, that it's not more on the illegal drugs, but it is more on the abuse of the legal drugs too, like the VIX and I think from this session, ang main takeaway ko is that people resort to drugs because of an objective or motivation to achieve something. Like there are factors such as the different sets and settings, as mentioned by Sir Orly. Parang actually ngayon ko lang yun na narinig and na fully discussed sa akin. So I'm really grateful for that. And for this discussion, I feel like everything is like interconnected when it comes to drug abuse. Na it's not only about drugs. There's also that mental health issue. There's also the external factor issue. And ayun, I'm really grateful kasi sobrang insightful ng talk na to. So I guess we can I'll leave it to Bran.
Yeah. Very good summary there, CJ. Spot on. And I know that we've finally discussed, we finally talked about the misconceptions that drug and what is it, no? Why do they do this? Like, as you said, that there's the progressive semantics na drug abuse equals to drug addiction here, na pag drug abuse, droga na agad. And it's all really interconnected, that we have to look at this much more different. We have to look at this beyond the drug. Because after all, the most important thing is, tao pa rin sila. May karapatan sila. Diba? And that's something, I think that was mentioned a while ago. We just look at the drug. We don't look at the person. And I think we can connect this actually with the next part, which is to talk more about the different support systems or recovery options for these people. Now that we've talked about the drug, let's talk about like the people themselves actually. Like, now that we know and define these, what can these people who are experiencing this find the proper support systems or the recovery options? What are the available out there for them?